Hey folks, it's Nye from BoxRocket, and in this really short tutorial I'm going to show you how to take your Degan. This is my Degan 763. You're going to take them and put them in the Unreal Engine so you can build your own third-person character explorer. I think this is a great thing to learn how to do. Alright, so let's get going. Alright, just so we can get going, I want to call note to the Imma Degan, or Degenerates. This is a NFT line started by Holiday. This is a great line. A lot of NFT lines are just 2D images, but this series of NFTs actually has utility, which allows us to do what we're going to do today, which is animate them and put them into the Unreal Engine. The reason why I'm showing everyone Unreal is because Epic, Tim Sweeney here, says they have an open door. Epic's not using crypto, but they welcome innovation in the space. So it's a great opportunity for Degans to be able to put their voids into Unreal. So in the previous tutorial, you might have learned about how to take your Degan and put them into Mixamo to be able to create these kinds of animations. So that's what we're going to start with, and then we're going to move into the Unreal Engine. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a Skeletal Mesh Rig. That's basically the rig that's going to come straight out of Mixamo, or just a rig that you have. I have this one here in Maya, so you can take this and export this directly out, or whatever the rig that you get, whatever application you're using to do 3D with. And then you're also going to need FBX files for idle and run. So you're going to need an idle and you're going to need a run. In this case, again, I'm using the FBXs from Mixamo. So once you have all of those things, you can go ahead and jump over into Unreal. Before we get there, I just want to make a note that we're going to be making a character blueprint, which is a sort of code that Unreal has to be able to create a character system. And then we're going to tie it to an animation blueprint. And within the animation blueprint, we're going to use what's called a blend. I know this is a number of interesting nodes, but the reason why we are doing this is because we're going to take the movement of the character blueprint across the ground using the velocity, and then we're going to trigger changes of animations in blend states, which is going to be able to make, I hope that makes sense. You'll see as I put it together in the engine. Okay, so here I have a brand new version, the third person of the Unreal Engine. When I press play, you'll see that the mannequin can run around. So I want to take a look at, let's go ahead and create a new folder, and I'm just going to call this prototype. And I'm going to start with the third-person character blueprint, which is what Unreal gives us with the mannequin and the third-person game mode. I'm going to take both of these and I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to bring this into the prototype folder and move it there. So now we've got a starter point, and I'm also just going to create a new level, go to the default, and then I'm going to click on this ground here. And in the details panel, I'm just going to say 15, 15, 15. This just gives me a really big road to play with. And I'm going to remove some atmospheric fog and reflection capture. This right here is the player's start. This is where we're going to be building our character blueprint. And when I press play, you'll see that the mannequin here has an open space. But what I want to be able to do is take our friend the Degan here and map it to the system that's already in place to create our own third-person character running around. Okay, so I need to bring the assets in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my Degan 763 rig, just drop it right in like that, and it's going to ask me, do you want to import a skeletal mesh, right? So that's the first thing we need to bring in. So I'll say import all, and it's going to think about this just for a second, and it's going to bring in everything that's associated with that FBX into the skeletal mesh. And it's also going to bring a bunch of materials. So when I bring this open and I open this guy up, you'll see that this is Degan 763. I could go through and I could fix all of these material shaders. I'm not really worried about that right now. If you want to, you can go to the previous tutorial to find more about that. But everything that's in here that's not associated with the skeletal mesh, which is the all of these materials, I'm just going to go ahead and create a new folder, and I'm going to say mat for materials, and I'm going to take these guys and I'll put them in like this. Move there. Take these and move them in like there, and these two and move them in like there. Okay, so that's all I need right now. So I want to swap out the third person character for the Degen. So I'm going to open up this character blueprint. And you'll see that it's a dockable thing. This is all of the blueprint code in here. This is a nice way that Unreal gives you the ability to program. So it abstracts some of that C++ code that's there. I don't need gamepad input, and I don't need VR at this point. No touch input. Really, all I need is the mouse input and the movement input. So I'm just going to leave that code the way it is. I'm going to press compile, which means it pushes it down to the code. And in the viewport, I'm going to click on the mesh, and then right here under the mesh, under the skeletal mesh, I'm going to drop down and get my Degen 763. And there it is. I'm just going to scale it down a little nicer. I can do that by, and then for my capsule component, I can also sort of stretch it like that. I'm going to compile. Now when I go back and I press play, the mannequin is still there, and that's because I haven't set my game mode. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to rename both of these guys. So I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call this Degen 763 care BP, and then in the game mode I'm going to rename this and call it a Degen 763 game mode. Okay, and I'm going to go into my world settings, and in my game mode override I'm going to say Degen 763 game mode, and my default pawn class I'm going to say 763 character BP. I essentially connected that game mode to our new character BP. When I press play, it is still not working, which is interesting. So I probably need to compile. Degan 7, okay. So the problem was that I had the wrong character blueprint here. So now when I open it and turn it on, you'll see that the Degan is now moving around, and that takes on the code of the movement of what was there before for the mannequin. But I'm going to want to actually set up animations to be able to move the Degen around in space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an idle and a running. I got both of these from Mixamo. I'm just going to drag them right into the Unreal Engine here. It's going to say, hey, do you want to use the skeleton that we imported, this Degen 763? So I'm going to go ahead and import it. And I've got the breathing idle here, right? There he is breathing. And if I open up the running, there he is too. So there's the running. So if I wanted to change the scale of the running here, I could do that by, that's way too fast, or even slow it down by 50%. But I think that's probably, I'll just use the default. Okay, so now I have two pieces of animation in there, and I'm going to want to trigger it so so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take this idle and this run, and I'm going to put them into an animation blueprint, and then I'm going to use an animation blend, and then using the character blueprint, which we have moving around the space, I'm going to use the velocity to trigger the animation. Okay, so let's go ahead and right click and say animation, and say animation blueprint. And I'm going to choose the Degen 763 skeleton, and I'm going to call that Degen 763 anim BP, and I can double click and open that. Now this is a blueprint that Unreal gives us to be able to create an output pose. So everything that we do will go into this output pose here. So just to get going, I'm going to say state machine. I'm going to add a new state machine, and I'm just going to call this motion. And I'm going to put this in there, and I'm going to compile, and I'm going to go inside here. Now I am inside a state machine, and what I said I wanted to do was I wanted to create a blend state within there. So when you start on the entry, I'm just going to go straight into a blend state. So I need to create that first. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to say animation, and I'm going to say blend space. And I'm going to use the Degen 763 skeleton, and I'm going to say Degen 763. If I can type. Wow. 763 motion. Anim. Terrible name. Now I've got this sort of panel here that allows me to blend things together, and really all I want to do is blend my idle and my running together. So I'm gonna say speed is on this one. Actually, no, I'm gonna say direction. Oh no, yeah, direction, and I'll do speed on this guy. And so I'll just make the envelope between 0 and 600. And I know it's 600 because if I go into the character blueprint and I look at the movement of the character, there is a move over ground or max walk speed in the character movement right here, max walk speed, and that's 600, right? So that's, since the max walk speed of the character blueprint along the ground is what I want to be mapping to, so that's what I'm going to be using. So I'll just do 600. So that means that 0 is 0 and then 600 is here. So I'm going to start with my breathing idle, and I'm going to take it all the way down to 0. And then I'm going to take my running and I'm going to put it at the top. So when I'm moving 600, it's running, and when I'm moving down. Now you could fill this with all kinds of animations and do different things, and you can connect them with all kinds of different vectors like velocity or direction and speed. But today, since we're just demoing, that's fine for me. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back to my animation blueprint. And you'll see that I have this blend space that I created. I'll just go ahead and, actually, no, I'm going to create a node and say motion blend. And inside that motion blend, I'm going to drop this guy, connect it, and I have that variable speed. I'm not going to worry about direction right now. I'm just going to take this out and I'm going to promote it to a variable. You see how it's made a variable here? So now I've got a variable speed that goes to the output, and then it goes to the motion, and then it pumps it into here. So I can compile that. You'll see already the Degan is idle, and in the preview editor, so if I change my speed to 600, he's running. If I go back to 0, he's not. And if I move it up slowly, he'll start to move and he'll go faster, okay? So we'll go back to 0. All right, great. So we've now connected our animation blueprint. But what we need to do now is we need to connect the velocity of the movement of this character blueprint along the ground to trigger it into the animation blueprint, right? So as this thing moves along the ground in the character blueprint, we're going to take velocity and we're going to trigger it in the animation blueprint, and then we're going to have that blend. Remember, we built that blend to have that move up to 600, and when it does, it'll trigger him running. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my animation blueprint, and I'm going into animation blueprint. I'm going to go to my event graph. Now this is a way for me to do programming in blueprints and animation blueprints and things like that. And I'm going to use casting, which is not a great way of doing this, but this is the easiest way to kind of get up to speed. So I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to say cast to, and I'm going to say, what did I call it? Degan 763. So I'll say Degan, and right there, cast a Degan 763 character BP. It's now found that node right here, and I'm going to connect it to this object. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to get that movement across the ground, and Unreal gives us a nice node to be able to do that. So I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to say get velocity, right? So there it is right there in transformation, get velocity. That is a function that allows us to get the movement of the character blueprint, and the return value is a vector, right? So I'm going to need to make this into speed, because I'll take the speed and I will say get speed. Oops, I'm sorry. I will say set speed, and I'll put it here. And what I'm going to do is I want to connect this, but I can't because I have a vector. So the first thing I'm going to do is say get vector length, like this. Now it turns it into a float. I can take this float, I can plug it in there, and I can compile. So now when we update this animation, I'm going to go find the character blueprint. I'm going to get the velocity of it. I'm going to figure out what that vector length, and I'm going to set it to that variable speed. And then when I go into the animation graph, inside my motion blend, I'm going to take that speed, I'm going to put it into my blend space, which is then going to change the speed. So as the character blueprint increases in speed, the Degan will run. Okay? So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to compile, and I'm going to save. And I want to make sure that I've got everything ready to go, and let me see if I press play. That is not working. Okay, I know why. Because if I go into the character mesh, in the animation mode, it says use animation blueprint. Right now we have nothing set. So what is it we need to do? We need to find the one that I just built right here, the 763 animation blueprint. You see already it's idling. I'll compile and I'll press play. And now our friend is running in 3D space. Okay, so this is a great way to start. I hope this makes sense, that you can take these skeletal mesh, these different animation clips, you can bring in your Degen, you can set up a character blueprint and put it in animation, and you can start moving characters around in the Unreal Engine. And I think we should do that. It's a great way to go. Okay, if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below, or we'll see you in the Discords. Thanks a bunch.